It's time to build momentum, to interrupt and end race-based hatred and violence.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. Welcome to this episode of Momentum. Let's build momentum to end or at least interrupt race-based hatred and violence in the places we find ourselves, with family, with friends, with coworkers, with people we go to church with the strangers in at the grocery store or the shopping mall. Make a commitment that you will be one of the people who interrupts the pattern instead of standing by and listening to people say things that are based on stereotypes, instead of being the one who is silent in the workplace when jokes that are inappropriate are told, instead of being at family dinners and events and simply rolling your eyes when your uncle or your grandmother or your cousin says something that is hateful and racially based. Let's interrupt that. So hopefully this is not your very first time being exposed to momentum, but what we do is we come together just for 15 minutes or less and just get recommitted. And so what can you do in 10 or 15 minutes? Well, obviously, I'm not trying to give you a webinar or teach you something that you didn't know. So the Momentum series is just about reminding you that you've made a commitment to be the person in the room or in the environment that stands for change or has a higher standard for cross-racial interaction. And so what I do try to do in 10 or 15 minutes is just give you something to think about for the week, sometimes an assignment to actually practice during the week, and sometimes just a little inspiration, information, a tip, a technique, a trend that you should be aware of. So today I have a primary focus on this idea of debate less, dialogue more. Debate less, dialogue more. So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, so that it's pretty self-explanatory at one level. Stop debating whether someone's right or wrong and try as much as you can to be in dialogue where you're not only trying to influence or convince someone, but you're also learning. I've learned so much about groups that I didn't know about, or groups I knew a lot about, but there's always more to learn, because I would be in dialogue. I would just be simply asking people to explain why you believe what you believe about this group of people, or tell me where you first learned that about this group of people, or how did when you were growing up, by the time you were 10 or 11, what did you know, or what had you been told about race and racism? And being in dialogue doesn't make people think they have to be defensive, especially if you're asking them about their own experience, because they're right if they're telling you their experience or what they have experienced or what they have done or not done. It's not about making them right or wrong. Now, in a dialogue where you're not particularly there to learn about, but you can have a dialogue about your different experiences. You can share your experiences, you can share what you believe and what you don't believe about certain groups of people, certain racial or ethnic identities. And you can do that when you're in dialogue without feeling I have to be right and you have to be wrong. I have to be right about everything that I know and believe, and I'm going to make you wrong because I don't agree with what you said or what you are thinking or how you are behaving. We get into this almost parental, but definitely from a place of power and authority. Well, I've read this book about white fragility, and so I'm just telling you, you are demonstrating white fragility right now. That may be a fact, but how does that inspire someone to change their behavior just because you're right? How does that give people options to consider the next time they're in a conversation? Or is it just more important for you to be right? So, dialogue is a tool, a process that we don't use often enough because so many of us, we live in a society where it's binary. You're right or you're wrong. You're good or you're bad. And so we just slip into this whole approach that, oh, that was a really racist joke that you told. And it's my job to tell you you're wrong and to make you feel bad about it because surely that's going to make you change your behavior in the future. Well, I think many of you would say, yeah, it doesn't usually work that way. Now, I'm not suggesting that dialogue is a tool to use from a place of weakness. Actually, dialogue is a tool to use that gives you more opportunity to build a relationship, more of an opportunity to actually be heard because you're sharing information. And I can share so much about how what someone just did or what I observed them do yesterday could be viewed as condescending or could be viewed as judgmental or could be viewed as harmful to the relationship, their relationship with other members of their team or to the customers that they are serving, that they are being paid to serve, because it feels like a conversation, not a condemnation. And so I really can't emphasize enough how important it is to debate less and dialogue more. So that's really my main message for today. But I do want to make sure that you are aware of something that I'm doing in the month of September 2025. And obviously, if you are seeing a recording of this and it's after September 2025, you can still find the recordings. So during the month of September 2025, I'm doing a series on my inclusive church show that is based on diving into the book Finding Refuge, Heart Work for Healing Collective Grief. And we'll be talking about it. I'll be talking about it with guests most of the weeks, and we'll be talking about what the author, Michelle Cassandra Johnson, says about how we can heal our individual and collective grief. But why I'm mentioning it here as well with Let's Build Momentum is because she writes about this from a perspective of how all of us have some grief and have been negatively impacted by racism, especially, and by other ways in our society where we distance ourselves from other groups of people. And yes, there's some focus on using meditation and other spiritual practices. But the big point that is an overlap for momentum is understanding how, with different groups we are a part of, especially racial identity groups, that we all do have some individual grief and we have some collective grief. And there really are things that you can do that will help you individually and as a group of people do some healing with that. So let me show you a quick video. So every week we'll be going into a couple of chapters of the book. And if you think you might find that interesting, then just go to YouTube and search for Inclusive Church Tracy Brown Finding Refuge, right? Or Inclusive Church New Thought Media Network and September 2025. Because every week we'll be doing a little bit more. So, reminder, this week we are focusing on looking for opportunities where we can practice dialogue about race-based hatred and violence, or the solutions to race-based hatred and violence, instead of finding ourselves or putting ourselves in the middle of a big debate about who's right, who's wrong, and focusing on enforcement and condemnation and arguing. So that's it for this week on Momentum. My name is Tracy Brown. I hope to see you again next Monday.